Hello, welcome back to FPL IQ. I'm Rob, aka FPL Hall, and I'm joined again by teacher FPL Lucian. And today we are looking at Nottingham Forest. They survived quite comfortably in the end. They didn't take it all the way to the last day, but still not necessarily a strengthened Premier League side. But today we're going to look into the predicted lineup, the strengths and the weaknesses, and players to potentially pick and avoid. How are you feeling about Nottingham Forest, Lucian? How are you doing?
Oh, kind of lacking the star power now that so many of them have left. I mean, Nottingham Forest were one of the most fascinating sides because at some point just after January, you could make I repeat, three different lineups of everyone that potentially could play for Nottingham Forest, from goalkeepers all the way up to the number 9 position. You could make so many formations as well. So in that sense, the irony is that when you sign 30 plus players and you only bank on like 3 to score most of your goals, I mean, it's just fascinating, and we'll see. With this discussion is going to be fantastic because we have to look at who steps up to the mantle.
We'll go straight into the predicted lineup. So it's one of those teams that has a wing-back system. It can be a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2 kind of formation, but it's one that does rely on wing backs for that width. Now we're starting to go with a question mark because Hennessy is the goalkeeper now, because they had 2 on loan last season, right? They had Henderson from Manchester United and they had Keylor Navas from Paris Saint-Germain. So at the moment, Hennessy is the goalkeeper. They are potentially signing Heaton. Oh no, that's Luton that's trying to sign Heaton, isn't it? Well, I think they're in the market for a goalkeeper anyway, but as it stands, Hennessy is in the goal. Back 3 are Philippe, Worrell and Niakate. Right wing back, Aurier. Left wing back, we've got Williams. It was Renan Lodi, but he was on loan and he's gone elsewhere. So at the moment, we've got Williams in that left wing back slot. Yates and Mangala in the middle, and up front, Danilo, Gibbs, White, and the central striker I've put here Onwei and Wood, because they have signed Wood now permanently. I think that was part of the loan deal, but I do think I always struggle with his name. Awonyi is the preferred choice in that central striker role. So how are you feeling about this starting 11?
I think certain Nottingham Forest fans, well, pretty much all Nottingham Forest fans would be not able to agree on a starting 11, really. I mean, that's the thing about Forest. Before this video, we had a discussion, right, about how they have so much squad depth. And really it's because so many of their players have some pedigree, but not like an elite pedigree bar Keylor Navas. I think at this stage, we really need to tell Forest's full story, from their transition from the Championship up to the Premier League, how they adapted, who they signed, and then what happened after January, to really see what Steve Cooper did to stick to his guns and play with the different formations, and in the end, how they managed to pull through, because there were so many factors that changed across the season so rapidly that everyone just remembered Morgan Gibbs White making the headlines, and that's about it, you know? And Brennan Johnson as well. Full credit to the boy.
Yeah, I think there'll be 2 names that we are kind of be focusing on. From an FPL point of view, as well as a footballing one, those are the 2 standouts for me. We'll go into the strengths, and I only have one. I really don't fancy Nottingham Forest as a cemented side. It's not one that has any players. We'll get onto some players that I've already just mentioned that we could pick and potentially avoid, but I just don't feel comfortable. They've got so many players. So squad depth for me is a strength and a weakness. It's a strength in the fact that they've got so many players that if one drops, they've got someone that can come in. But from an FPL point of view, you don't want that rotation. But if you've got a strong 11 and someone gets injured and the strength retains a little bit, if you've got a player playing, they keep that potential up. We talked about Newcastle earlier, and we said, if one of those defenders are injured, I feel the quality that steps in lowers, therefore the whole team's point potential lowers. But Nottingham Forest has so many players. It's like a running joke. It's a meme online about all these players signing for Nottingham Forest. It felt like there wasn't a player they were signing last year. They seem to have slowed down a little bit now. It reminded me, if you remember a few years back when QPR were in the Premier League with semi-rich owners, and they just bought a load of mercenaries on big contracts, and they had so many players, and then they ended up going down, and they've not been back since. That's something that worries me. It doesn't feel like it's financially responsible. I know they're not huge names, but they're not cheap Premier League players, and they have so many of them that it's probably going to be expensive. And think of the likes of Jesse Lingard, who's gone now, but he was on a supposedly huge contract. So I'm just going to stick with that one strength of the idea that if you have, let's say, Gibbs White, and one of the midfielders is injured, then the quality will stay close to their best because they've got so many players that can come and fill in without really dropping off. Any strengths that you like to point out about Nottingham Forest?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to add to your point about how each player has their own unique quality, at least in terms of how they contribute to attack. I think that's one of the things that Nottingham Forest did well, at least in terms of recruitment. Well, Jesse Lingard. But beyond that, really, the starting 11 that Nottingham Forest put out that ended the season, especially with Wood, Iwoni, and Gibbs White up front. Sorry, Brennan Johnson up front, supplied by Gibbs White, really, put a lot of different qualities mid-game that turned the course of many matches. A very famous example was how they turned it around against Man City that earned them a 1-1 draw at home. I think things like that really make a difference when you need a winner. And that was basically Nottingham Forest's strategy in the second half, to adapt early and to really turn the game on its head midway through. That is a key theme of Steve Cooper's side. But coming to this season, I think we're waiting to see if they want to play more on the front foot in terms of dictating what happens in the first half. Because a lot of the time, there was a role reversal. In the first half of last season, they took leads early, but they gave it away in the second. And then they decided to go, you know what, we'll concede the lead, it's okay. And then they come back in the second. So once again, this comes down to player qualities. And I think they were arguably the best side that abused the 5-man substitution rule that was new to the Premier League at the time. By introducing all these potential players, they could unearth some valuable gems, the most notably Danilo, who went on a mini streak end of last season as well. If you have that many players, you've just got to try all of them. They had the likes of Freuler dictating play from deep. Eventually, they tried John Joe Shelby. They went with double runners, Yates and O'Brien initially, and then they brought Kouyaté in. They have so much depth, but I think the biggest and most obvious strength about Nottingham Forest is that their talismans, their best players, operate in a very predictive way. It's all about Brennan Johnson / Neco Williams bombing down the right side before Aurier showed up, and then crossing for the striker on the left. If it's not Chris Wood, if it's not Jesse Lingard, it would be someone like Awoni, who is great in the air. That's about it, and I hope personally that they maintain this form, because that's what we love for FPL. You do something, like, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
We can add a little bit of a strength then. So we have talked about squad depth, and like you say, they were a team that really used the 5 substitution rule, but it's also a squad that they can now build on. They brought in, we jokingly say how many players that they brought in, but this means that now they've got that base and that core of players that if they do go on to sign more players, they don't have to bring in a lot of players anymore. They can just focus on maybe a couple of marquee signings to say, well, we've got a full squad now, we've got plenty of players, now we just want a new star midfielder, we want a new star goalkeeper, and they can go out there and spend a lot of money on just 2 or 3 players instead of 20 or 30 players. But going on to the weakness then, we are going to stick on that idea, as it feels sometimes that they've got as many players as their players have got FPL points. We talk about defenders, and I always sort of have a 100-point benchmark for my defenders, and none of their defenders got close. Aurier was the closest with 70. After that, it's 61. After that, it's in the 50s, the 40s, the 30s. They've just got too many players. The only ones that I would even look at for this side would be Gibbs White for 6 million, or Johnson, who's now out of position, who's also 6 million. But I just feel as though if they were 5.5, that would turn my head. We've talked about some players being about 5.5, that if we can't stretch the budget, we'll settle on that. But 6 million is too close to 6.5 or 7 million for me to bother with these players. It just feels as though they don't have a lot of quality. They've just got 2 players that stand out for me, and they've got so many players. It could be it's rotation. and overpriced. We talked, Newcastle is the video before this. You could get Botman and Burn for 4.5 million or a Nottingham Forest defender for 4.5 million, and that's not good. It's not worth the price. They've got the same prices as Brighton players, Brentford players, Villa players, Newcastle players. What's going to pull you to Nottingham Forest? Have a look at the weaknesses of the defence. Second worst for attempts, bottom 5 for goals, bottom 3 for big chances, bottom for chances in the box. Doesn't bode well for their attack. So we're talking about the two key players of Johnson and Gibbs-White, but they're in the relegation zone for the key stats you want from your attacking players. Defensively speaking, they've lost both of the goalkeepers because they were on loan. So right now they've just got Hennessy in goal. And they're also in the bottom 5 for clean sheets, goals conceded, attempts in the box conceded, total attempts conceded. So you are looking that from an attacking point of view, they're in the relegation zone. From a defensive point of view, they're in the relegation zone. So for me, there's just nothing at all. If Johnson and Gibbs-White would have been 5 or 5.5 million, it would have perhaps turned my head. But these guys have the same prices of teams that are much better. I think it looks like they were safer than what they were because it came to the last day and everyone's focus was on Everton. But Nottingham Forest didn't do anything for me last season to make me think that they are an established Premier League side, and I envisage them to struggle again this year. I've made the reference before about relegation is like running away from a bear. You don't have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than the people slower than you. That's, I think, going to be another situation for Nottingham Forest. Can they outrun the likes of Luton, Burnley, Sheffield United, Bournemouth, people who I think will be low down? So from an FPL point of view, I have nothing positive to look at. There's no key metric or key stat that stands out to make me think, oh, he might be worth a punt, he might be a good shout, because they're in relegation zones for every kind of stat you're looking at, in attack and defence. Any weaknesses that you want to discuss about this side?
It doesn't help that they have Arsenal, City, Chelsea, and Man United all away from home in the first 7 fixtures. Yep. Could be a blessing in disguise. Maybe that 5.5 that you're asking for might come sooner than we think.
They are
after price drops.
Second bottom on the fixture ticket. So I always look at the first 8 games. They're second from bottom for the first 8 games. And Burnley are bottom, and that's partially to do with the fact that they blank in game week 2. So they don't even play. So realistically, Nottingham Forest are the bottom of the fixture ticket for the opening 8 games because Burnley have 1 fewer fixture, therefore they can't get any points. There's nothing good. So you can stick the boot in now. What are you thinking against?
With Forest, I think I'll touch more on the tactical perspective of things because they've rotated so much due to the fact that their players are not perfect. In the first half of the season, they were powered by penalty saves. And yeah, I think quite a number of us were like, should we ever consider Dean Henderson? All because he saved 2 penalties in a row, I think. Was it against West Ham and Spurs or something like that? But yeah, point is that their home form is scary good. I mean, the thing about being reliant on home form is that you need something to go your way. I think a lot of what Forest did well last season was that they took advantage key moments in terms of set pieces, because the real secret in home advantage lies in the fact that the crowd can actually influence referee decisions to actually go your way more often than not. And it doesn't have to be directly influencing the scoreline, such as winning a penalty or having a goal disallowed and overturned. No, I'm just talking about like situations where you can win free kicks, or a team commits a soft foul and they get away with it because they're just at home and the crowd is roaring them on. Because referees use common sense, right? They understand the flow of the game and they don't want to disrupt the flow of it too much. So I think that's what Forest have going for them. Forest Ground is a very small and flat stadium, just like Bournemouth. And when the crowd starts going, they really can turn teams around. I think this is why, in some sense, the crowd does turn against them when the going gets tough. And without a proper leader on the pitch, I can foresee Forest kind of collapsing. I think the default captain is Scott McKenna. I'm pretty sure I'm desperately wrong there. At this stage, once again, they had 3 different teams promoted from the championship, playing in the first half of the season, and then by the time the final game week of the season rolled around, they were virtually unrecognizable. So I say this because as a weakness, I think right now we're looking for Forest to dig into character, because realistically, they're only looking at Burnley and Luton. Oh, sorry, Sheffield United and Luton, who are arguably worse than them. We could even say that Forest are on par with Burnley at this stage. When you're looking for heroes, you're looking for character. And I can say this much: Morgan Gibbs White, based on his history with Wolves, as a Wolves fan, I know for sure that doesn't he has character personally, individually, but as a leader of a team, he's still very raw. So, as Forest's best player, if you're not ready to step up to the plate, things are going to be very volatile, especially in the opening game weeks. So, they need some sort of stabling presence. I think what we forget about Forest is that they have a relatively young team, and it's quite likely that even Wayne Hennessy might be the one getting the armband. So, it remains to be seen. And I just feel that their volatility in terms of their mentality is going to be what distinguishes them between relegation fodder and someone that will at least fight for their life, be plucky, or somehow pull off miracles such as penalty saves and random goals from set pieces. That's my biggest thing that disturbs me about Forest.
I think that's a really good point about the lack of leadership, because we said with so many players coming to the club, so many, a ridiculous amount, and into your starting 11, there's no one there who is the staple who you think will pull them all together, get them all gelling. And that's probably, they could improve next season because they've had some games under the belts together now. They could start to gel. They could start to figure out the best 11. Is the quality there? We're gonna have to again wait and see for that. But so many new faces, and I would have thought it was McKenna as well, because he seems to get really stuck in and he's quite vocal on the pitch. But it's Worrell who's the captain and Yates who's the vice captain. But the final point I'll say just about rotation, it's only Gibbs White with 36 starts and Johnson with 33. Everyone else is low 20s and less. So who are you going to pick? I've said before with defenders, if you've got a defender, one of the key things is they keep clean sheets. And then another one is that they play. You don't want to make defender transfers. It's like goalkeeper transfers. The further up the pitch you get, the less you want to, the more you'll be willing to make the changes to your FPL side. You don't want to make a 4.5 million free transfer or for a goalkeeper or a defender, right? You want to do it for a big midfielder or a striker who's in form. And the fact that Aurier is the top starting defender with 22 starts is worrying. And don't even talk about the striker. 17 for Owen Ye. I always butcher his name. Owen Ye, and 9 for Wood, and 6 for Dennis. It's just, they're not, for me, a touchable FPL side. So we'll get into the picks that we would, if we were forced or if fixtures were kinder. And I can only suggest Gibbs White and Johnson. Johnson is out of position. He's 6 million. He has, he's nailed with 33. Gibbs White with 36 starts. He's nailed. He seems to pop up with important goals. And if you had to force me to choose a third one, it would be Serge Aurier, because he's a right wing back. So he does like to get forward. Arguably a little bit too much for a defender. He might sometimes forget his defensive duties. That's it. There's no other positives. If they had a nice run of 3 fixtures and I was messing around with my midfield, I play a 5-man midfield. My 5th one, let's say Mitoma, is out of form. Brighton's got a tough fixture run. Notts Forest are looking good. Gibbs White's got 1 or 2 goals already. I might risk it on that. But there's a lot of ifs and buts before one of these Forest guys work their way into my FPL side. Are there any players from here that you would be looking at, or any stats that stuck out that made you think they'd be good?
The reason Serge Aurier is top of the defenders list is only because he's had the most appearances. So I think we would tend to believe that Serge Aurier, especially from his Spurs playing days, would be the one that everyone would flock to, right? I mean, I look through his attacking output, because we talk about rotation so much, and we have to at least acknowledge that somehow, some way, Forest have home games against Sheffield United, Burnley, and Brentford. Somewhere in there. I don't know which game was cancelled, though, in game week 2. So we need to check on that.
That's Luton, Burnley.
I think for Forest's case, if we rotate a 4.5 million defender at home, we could at least take advantage of the easy fixtures while they're still there. Honestly speaking, because Forest at home are still a force, and ignoring bonus point potential, really, I'd still favor attacking output. And for me, the decision lies in who is the likeliest to produce attacking output. That lies with the player who wears the number 7 shirt, Neco Williams. I mean, he's been used sparingly in all sorts of positions. He started at right back. People figured out he was not Trent Alexander-Arnold. Then he moved him to left back. But when he came on as a sub, he did tend to play left wing and right wing as well. So there is a lot of potential for the boy because he has shown a penchant for dribbling past his man. He hits the byline much, much better than Serge Aurier. And he actually scored against Liverpool, ironically. So when you look at these players side by side, Aurier has 1 goal, so does Neco Williams. And that's about it. You're looking at slim pickings here. And I mean, who picks Forest defenders for bonus potential with a clean sheet, right? So really, you are looking at a player that has some attacking potential. Like if Renan Lodi was still part of Forest's side, I would recommend him in a heartbeat. But Neco Williams is basically second choice. And I am all for it because Neco Williams is a young player that has shown ability to improve individually. Like he was very raw last season and he was a pretty big part of Forest's side when they got promoted as well. So as someone who was part of that journey, I feel that he has more potential, especially backed by the fans, compared to someone like Gibbs White, who's only joined them for a season. So that would be my first pick. If not, the standard names all apply. Brennan Johnson, although I am hearing rumors that he might be signing for somebody else. But Taiwo Awoniyi, that's the other one. He really has earned his spot. And I don't know why Steve Cooper has rested him at times. So, yes, because Emmanuel Dennis was still at the club. So I'm not sure if Dennis is still there.
Yeah,
Has he gone?
No, he's still there.
So, so there is that risk of rotation from, Dennis and Wood and whichever other forward they sign in the summer. At this stage, I'm happily recommending a fullback because no one in their right mind would stick to Forest against a big team like Arsenal or Man United or Man City.
I think, so the weaknesses we've already covered. So striker is rotation risk and defense. You wouldn't really want to play him at all against bigger clubs. But this is a feeling that seems to be prevalent throughout all FPL managers and teams. Do you know who the highest owned player is for Nottingham Forest? Who do you think?
Wayne Hennessy?
Nope.
Wayne Hennessy?
Well,
the 4.0 guy?
Here's to give you. So you just said Hennessy is your choice, right? Hennessy is the 3rd most popular player for Nottingham Forest with a mere 1.1%. And he's the 3rd most popular and he's just creeped over 1%. And because he's 4 million. Horvath, he was the one who was at loan at Luton who's gone back from last season. He's 4.5 and he's 0.3% owned. But yeah, Hennessy's a 4 million goalkeeper. He's 1.1%. It's the non-playing forward Surridge, the 4.5. He's when your most popular player is your 4.5 million barely playtime striker. If that is that just really epitomizes people's feelings towards this side as an FPL option, because the top player is a non-playing 4.5 million forward. You do have Gibbs White with 4.1%, which isn't too bad at all, but then everyone else is like way under 1%, like 0.5% and less. Any particular weaknesses or anything to avoid that we've not covered?
I think there will be a particular few central midfielders that will bomb forward and get a random assist or goal. I would strongly suggest to stay away because Steve Cooper has demonstrated rotation within central midfield itself. Sometimes he's played a flat midfield 3. Sometimes he's pushed Gibbs White all the way back into the midfield 3 just to accommodate 3 strikers. We've seen that at the start of the season. I really fear for that decision making because that's something Steve Cooper has yet to master, how he wants to change the destiny of his games moving forward. The fact that he's lost Renan Lodi means that he has to completely change the side. I just hope that he doesn't revert to playing ultra defensive football even at home, because he's just in charge of one of those sides that doesn't need a majority of possession to win games even at home. I've said it. So just stay away from the central midfielders.
And I think to wrap up, I would just suggest stay away from this entire football club from an FPL point of view, to be honest, because I'm giving these guys a 2 out of 10, and that is 1 point for Gibbs White and 1 point for Brennan Johnson, and that's it. What would you rate this side out of 10?
1 out of 10 for their home form.
So, yeah.
I love their home form so much.
So this is basically like the lowest score combined as well that we've given so far. It's just not looking good. The relegation zone for attack and defensive stats, so many players, so much rotation. It's not even like a newly promoted side where you can name the starting 11 and have a player who's going to play 30, 35 games a season and at least pick up 2 points a week. This is worse than that. You're going to get 2 points a week every other week and 0 for the other ones. It's not a great thing. But we're covering every team, and it is still good to go over because something might have jumped out and made us think that they would be a better team or have some hidden gems. But for me, that's just not been the case. Yeah, go on.
It's about the old adage. It's about the old adage of stock market trading, right? Buy low and sell high.
Yeah, you would have to be a risky trader if you are going to start the season with Nottingham Forest. Bottom of the fixture ticker as well as all this other stuff, so it's not ideal. But thanks for joining us today. Next time it is newly promoted side Sheffield United back in the Premier League. The Blades, are they going to be cutting up the opposition, or are they going to have a blunt blade? Thank you very much for joining us, and as always, have a good one.